Team Fortress 2 is a very balanced and well-made game.
Now!
Except when it isn't. So I've taken it upon my hands to rebalance TF2. As someone who currently has 70 hours in TF2, now 145.4, I'm not very good. I have what the industry calls a skill issue. I also don't have all the weapons, so there will be a green check next to items I own and a red X next to items I don't. Also thanks to WheezyTF2 for all the pictures from his man vs. machine weapons tier list, link in the description. These screenshots were taken anywhere between 4 years and 6 months ago, so they may be outdated, I don't know. All of these are subject to change, so let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. I'm trying to learn how to make my own servers to test my balance theories, so I'm going to try to speed through this to keep the video rather short. Yeah, like that's going to happen. Anywho, with all of that out of the way, let's get started. By the way, everything is rounded up if it's a decimal, and mini crits when it would normally crit applies to random crits too, if it doesn't already. One more quick thing. While I'm talking, there will be photos of the weapon changes on the screen. Those take priority over whatever I'm saying, because of how many times this script has been through changes. Before we get into weapons though, let's talk about classes. I think all classes are fair in TF2, although Sniper and Demo need to be nerfed. We'll get to Demo later. The only base class I'm nerfing is Sniper, making him unable to pick up ammo from dispensers or Medic. We'll get to that later. For his primary weapon, so he can't camp. Also making it to where he has to go back to spawn or find an ammo box more often, making him more vulnerable and less likely to stay in one place. But he will also get small ammo boxes on kill with melee, dropping them for him or his team, making that support role feel more justified. All of his sniper rifles would fire tracer darts like the Machina and can't get random crits. Sniper can jump scope now though. I think Spice Cloak should reduce marked for death time by half if it doesn't already. He also should gain Scout's movement speed when he disguises as Scout. Speaking of Scout, realistically, if there was a Scout-like character IRL, he would have a lot more armor. If we apply this logic to TF2, it would be unbalanced. But I think his class should have 5 additional HP, bringing him up from 125 to 130. But it would make Scout able to take slightly more damage and retreat better. One thing I changed to all the classes, or at least most of them, is that weapons like shotguns can be used with every character with a shotgun slot, so stuff like the Family Business can be used in every class that has a shotgun slot, along with the PBPP being able to be used on engineers, but not the winger. The winger comment will make more sense once I get to it. Also, the maximum move speed increase for each mercenary is going to be removed. I believe the movement speed cap was 175, but now it would be infinite. First up, we have Scout weapons. Scout is my 4th most played class, my top 4 being in reverse order, Scout, Sniper, and then Spy/Pyro, depending on the day. Anyway, Scout. The first weapon we're changing is the Rap Assassin. It's garbage, top tier trash. Despite what Grouch said, bleed isn't God. We're going to change the minus 65 damage penalty to 50 instead, so that it can be used as a melee weapon more efficiently. I'm also going to make it bleed for 10 seconds. I don't know what the norm is for this weapon, but it's that now. Next is the Boston Basher. This is one of the very few weapons I'm not actually going to change anything about because there's nothing really to change. After that is the Candy Cane. I'm going to change the damage vulnerability from explosions to fire. This is for 2 reasons. The first is that Scout is meant for countering Soldier and Demoman, so having an explosion weakness basically throws it all out the window, and also Candy Canes melt, so screw it. Then we have the Pretty Boy's Pocket Pistol. I'm going to change the firing speed from plus 15 to plus 10, and increase the health per hit up to 5 instead of 3, and decrease the damage by 5%, keeping the clip size the same, making this weapon more valuable for keeping yourself alive, but not as much for actually dealing damage. I personally run this weapon whenever I play Scout. Next up is the Winger. This weapon gives me mixed feelings, because on one hand I think it's a bit busted, but on the other hand the minus 60% clip size makes me think it's fair. This weapon to my knowledge is mainly used with the Force of Nature and Atomizer to increase jump, so why don't we capitalize on that? I propose that we turn it into a backpack type weapon, still in the secondary slot, making it plus 50% jump height when equipped, a plus 5% damage increase on melee, and the user takes no fall damage. Thanks, Great Blue. Making it to where, yes, you can Force of Nature or Soda Popper spam, but you could also use it with a melee weapon to make that more feasible, because I think the melee weapons are really underrated in TF2. This class has been kind of boring so far because this is one of the classes I have the least changes for. All of the other classes will have a lot more interesting weapons. Figured I'd start out with the most boring one to ramp up the increase in entertainment. Anyway, the next weapon is the Flying Guillotine. I'm not changing it. Not really much to say here. After that thrilling change, we have the Atomizer. I like the idea of taking into account MVM with this weapon, especially considering it's one of two that does so. My excuse for not changing this one is the way we've changed Scout as a whole. He's a lot more airborne and a little more tanky, so mini critting while in the air is good, especially with the Ringer now being what it is, making this weapon a lot more practical. The Criticola is arguably overshadowed by its brother, the Bonk. That doesn't mean this weapon doesn't have its upsides and downsides. Each attack mini-critting and marketing for death for 4 seconds is really good, but I think after you use it, you should mark yourself for death for 2 seconds per mark for death on enemies. Now, what I mean by this is you should be able to mark multiple enemies with marked for death, and you would have 2 seconds per enemy that you did this to afterwards. Making it not too bad if you only hit one person, but if you go after an entire army, it becomes crippling. I'm trying to take account new and less experienced players into this game because I feel like sometimes you can do really well in a match, and then the next match there's like 15 snipers and 5 soldiers that will not leave you alone. Remember how I talked about the Bonk Atomic Punch earlier? Well, here it is in all of its glory. It's good. I guess it's a way to get behind the front lines, but not being able to attack really cripples this weapon, and the slowness is also really bad. I think we should make it last from 8 seconds to 10 seconds and do nothing else. This weapon didn't really need much changing, and the only thing I can really think of is a lot of loopholes and exploits in the form of being able to melee attack. Here comes the fun one, the Force of Nature. This weapon is good, however it has its problems. I would increase the damage penalty to 15%, but increase its clip size to where it has 3 in the clip, which is still having half of the OG scattergun. After the Force of Nature is the Babyface Blaster. I think this weapon is personally underrated. I really like the concept of the Babyface Blaster, but I think there could be some changes to make it a lot better. I think the boost reduced on air jumps kind of defeats the entire purpose of Scout, which is to be a mainly aerial-focused character. I mean, you essentially can't jump, and being in the air is crucial to surviving with this character. So, we'll remove that. We'll also clear it to when you take 40 or more points of damage instead of 1 or more, which is ridiculous. Once you get a lot of boost, it's very easy to proceed to dominate, and it reduces a lot quicker than it builds up. Another change I would make is on hit with any weapon instead of just the Babyface Blaster, making it easier to build up a boost. Because if you can get boost reduced while you don't have the blaster out, why not gain it too? After this is the Backscatter, basically just a worse off-brand backburner. I'm going to change the fired from close range to fired at their back, because considering it's less accurate, it's a lot harder to hit somebody from across the map, but it still makes it just that more feasible, because realistically, with a 20% less accuracy, it's going to be hard to do that and consistently build it, so unless you're just goated and really lucky, you're not going to be able to stack mini-crits from somebody a mile away. I think mid-range is already fair enough, but I just want to give it that one extra bit of chance. Still keeping the no random critical hits, though, because that would be a pain in the ass. The Sandman is a weapon that exists. Slow as a bitch, but this one is barely noticeable. So we're just going to boost Scout's speed instead, making him go from 133 to 140%. The Fan of War is my favorite Scout weapon. It's really good, and it's definitely earned its place as one of the best, considering the marked for death ability. Personally, I'm not going to change this because I feel like the entire point of the Fan of War is to essentially whack someone with it to give them marked for death, and then you or your team mini-crit them to death. I don't think anybody actually uses the crits with the Fan of War, but I could be wrong, so I'm not going to change it. It's a solid weapon, let's keep it that way. The Mad Milk. Oh boy, the Mad Milk. I don't really know what to think of this weapon considering how used it is, and also the fact that it's really good when it's got its best secondaries. I do think we should increase the cooldown by 5% and no refill from ammo boxes though. Next we have the Shortstop, another scattergun used by Scout, but in the form of a pistol-looking weapon, because it's a shortstop. I'm giving it an extra 5% damage and increasing the push range. Next! The Sun on the Stick is basically the Scout X Pyro weapon. The damage penalty really cripples it, and unless you have a Pyro on your team, this weapon is basically pointless. So I'm just going to decrease the damage penalty to minus 10%, and then make it crit when it would mini-crit. That's it. I think that's fair. I forgot to write that down, so that's why the last one was final, and why this one doesn't sound as rehearsed. Finally for Scout, we have the legendary Soda Popper. This weapon is kind of busted. It's definitely Scout's best scattergun, other than stock, and I don't have much to say about it. There are a lot of things we could do to it, but a lot of them would make it better or not make sense. I think a 10% damage penalty is very fair for this weapon. Well, that was Scout. Like I said, him and Soldier are probably going to be the classes I have the least to say about. Soldier being the next, by the way. So expect more interesting changes within the next few mercenaries.
Yeah. Tick-tock, heavy like a Brinks truck, looking like I'm tick-tock, shining like a wristwatch, I'ma grab your wrist.
The Soldier is big, stupid, and slow. That's why he's the definition of an American. He's the character that makes the most sense to be this way. He uses rocket launchers. A lot of rocket launchers. That's his main thing, and most of his unlockable weapons increase the ability to perform rocket jumps, which is basically where you jump in the air really high with your rocket by aiming it down and blasting it towards your feet. How this doesn't break his legs, I don't know, but that's just video game logic. It's extremely fun when you get the hang of it, but I still haven't really gotten the hang of it, so I'm not going to talk about it much here. But what I will talk about is the rocket jumper, a weapon specifically designed to teach people how to rocket jump. I love the idea of this weapon, but you know what I don't love? Being unable to cap. Being unable to pick up the intelligence makes the rocket jumper basically useless in CTF. But people with this rocket launcher should reasonably be able to take the intelligence, or pastime jack. I actually have no idea what this is, but I presume it's some sort of game mode that I've never tried, so whatever. That would be my only change, is completely removing that stat. The weapon that's traditionally used with the rocket jumper, called the Market Gardener, does critical hits while rocket jumping. This weapon is fine. I'm not going to change it, honestly. I think it's pretty balanced. The slower firing speed makes sense, that you can't just, spam it. The random critical hits is already something that most people think shouldn't be in the game, so whatever. I'm fine with this. The final piece of the Soldier kit is the Man Dreads, making it to where if you land on an enemy, you deal damage to them. If you combo this, the Market Gardener, and the Rocket Jumper, you essentially get one of the most broken playstyles in the game that is also completely trolling. Of course, you have to be very good in order to do this, way better than you have to be with someone like Sniper, but it's still really OP. Am I gonna nerf this? No. It's funny. I will nerf these boots, though. They have no downside other than not being able to use a shotgun, which nobody really uses with Soldier anyway. So we're going to add one simple little stat to change this. Minus 10% health. That's right, we're limiting Soldier's health, because now with this nerf, as Soldier, you can get killed with just the Market Gardener while air jumping. Anyway, enough Soldier. Time to talk about the actual Soldier. The next weapon we have is the gunboats. Minus 60% blast damage from rocket jumps. This is fair. This is reasonable. I'm not going to change this. Make me. Next, we have the reserve shooter. If I understand this weapon correctly, then when you launch someone with explosions, grapple hooks, or rocket packs, whatever that is, you do a mini crit. How about we just make it mini crit against airborne targets? Seems fair. I'm also going to give it a plus 10% accuracy, but it only has 3 shots per clip, so it's more skill than luck. That's something that I'm going to be doing a lot in this video, is making things more skill-based than luck-based. Now, the Liberty Launcher is known as one of the Soldier's worst rocket launchers, and that's not fun, because it has one of the best designs of a rocket launcher, that being the whole military green and stars aesthetic, which I love because patriotism. We're going to reduce the damage penalty to minus 15 and replace it with an increased reload time by 1 second per clip. No notes, this weapon took way too long for me to think about a switch. Custom weapon time. I'm going to be doing a few of these throughout the video, so randomly I'll probably just throw one in, surprise you, catch you off guard. Here's the first one. I call it the Thunderous Tower. I don't know how to make a 3D model, but the point is that Soldier went up to a broken American tank, said, "Mine," took the cannon off, and then started using it. This weapon is going to be more of a strictly ground-only rocket launcher, considering it resembles that of a tank. We're going to give it a plus 20% splash radius, plus 25% damage, 40 total ammo, and plus 50% launch radius, but plus 30% self-damage on rocket jumping, minus 50% clip size, plus 2-second reload time increase per clip, and minus 10% movement speed. That was a lot, so let me explain. I want this weapon to be more ground-focused. You can rocket jump with this weapon, but it's very ill-advised. Tanks don't tend to stop in the middle of the war and go waltz over to get ammo, so you really shouldn't either. This is definitely more of a statty weapon compared to the rest of the TF2 weapon library. I hope it's not too over or underpowered. My future custom weapons aren't going to have this many stats. I just wanted to make sure it was a ground-only rocket launcher and made sense in the style of a tank, but not be too broken or too stupid. The Half Satoichi is definitely an interesting weapon. The one problem I have with all swords in this game is the range. I swear, almost every single time I get killed by a Demoman, he has way longer range than he should. So, in order to counter this, all swords are given the same length as the Persian Persuader, with hitboxes that match the length of the sword. What I mean by this is we will simply reduce the hitbox and change the model to make it shorter. I don't want to be 5 feet away from a Demoman and he randomly kills me with his 9-iron. But I do want the hitboxes to match the model size. Other than that, I don't really care about this weapon. I put it here because I really wanted to rant about Demo Knight. I despise Demo Knight. Rant aside, the next weapon is the Righteous Bison, which is absolutely terrible. It is a dog shit weapon that barely does anything. The speed is terribly slow, and it only does 20% damage to buildings. The main complaint is the speed, so we're going to boost the speed by a good bit. We're going to increase it by 30%. This should hopefully make the weapon actually practical and useful. We're also going to make it to where it can only be deflected by air blasts from Pyro. Considering I'm not touching the base jumper, let's move on to the direct hit, which is one of the best rocket launchers Soldier has. If you're skilled enough to use it properly, the direct hit does exactly what it sounds like the point of the RPG is, to directly hit somebody. But it still has a little bit of blast damage. So let's change that, shall we? My proposition is to make the blast radius for the direct hit 0. Now, I know what you're saying, that's kind of ridiculous. It's a rocket launcher, it's literally an explosion. But hear me out. We increase the damage by 50% instead of 25%, and also mini-crit airborne targets. This gives the direct hit a lot more skill required to use efficiently, because you can't just, aim in a general direction and hit somebody with it. You have to actually perfectly line up and shoot. Personally, I don't think the direct hit is an overpowered weapon in itself, it's just called the direct hit, so it should be a direct hit. I also want it to mini-crit when it would normally crit. This change isn't something I'm really passionate about, it's just what I think would make sense. Not necessarily needing to be implemented, just something that I think would be cool. The airstrike is one of my favorite weapons in all of TF2, in concept. See, like I said earlier, I'm not good at rocket jumping, so I can't just blast off and recreate the Vietnam War against my enemies. Eventually I'll be able to, but right now I can't. The change I propose is the damage taken from rocket jumping, changing it to be a 20% damage resistance to rocket jumping, which is just 5 more than it already is, but making it a minus 15% explosion radius, because realistically, if you're smart with this weapon, you can deploy like 500 rockets towards the enemy and cause mass hysteria. So it doesn't really need a lot of blast radius. Other than that, I'm going to leave it alone because it's a pretty good weapon. The black box is debatedly overpowered. I hear a lot of people say it's really cheap and kind of busted, but I also hear a lot of people say it's just a good weapon. Personally, I think that the black box is fine, but we need to decrease the blast radius by about 10%, because what it does is on hit, you gain up to 20 health. So you make the damage range less, it'll be less of an opportunity to get that hit. Also gain up to 15 health, but with a 8 gain average. Meaning, instead of gaining up to 20, you gain up to 15, and instead of normally gaining 3 to 4, you would gain about 8. Cow Mangler 5000 is a weapon that exists. There isn't really much to say about this one, it's okay. I always get this one and the Thompson 6000 mixed up. I mean, it's a good weapon, I think. I don't really think anything should be changed other than maybe the charge speed for the alt fire and the projectile speed, but that's really it. The escape plan was once part of a different weapon, and that's definitely a good thing, because splitting up the equalizer was a really good call, but the way they did it wasn't. Honestly, the escape plan is okay, but realistically 90% less healing from medic sources is absolutely horrendous. The marked for death after effects should be 1 second after putting away the escape plan, and also 90% less healing from medic sources should be 60, and only while the weapon is active, or you're marked for death. The other half of the equalizer is interesting. Damage increases as the user becomes injured, but this is a melee weapon on Soldier, who has a rocket launcher. So why would you ever use your melee weapon? What I propose is that the damage increase is for all of your weapons as the user becomes more injured, and then also 75% less healing from medic sources. But you're marked for death while firing, because it's a passive buff. Passive downsides are needed. Now, that sounds simple, but what I mean by while firing is while one of your projectiles is out. So say you fire a rocket and it goes for like 10 feet before hitting something, you would be marked for death during that entire 10 feet duration. The battalion's backup is a battle banner that does battle banner things. Personally, I think this weapon, or banner, I guess, is perfectly fine, but I think it should be plus 10 max health instead of 20. I don't ever use the banners, because I don't have any, so yeah. Next we have the disciplinary action, my favorite melee weapon for Soldier. Honestly, I don't really want to change anything about this. It's really good, and it helps boost your mobility to get you and your teammate into the front lines, so no change. The buff banner, I mean, sure, it's okay. But compared to the battalion's backup and the conch, this thing looks like a joke. I'm putting a flat plus 10% max health on this one too. And then there's the conch itself, which is another banner that's actually pretty good, because it gives a plus 4% health regeneration per second on wear. I'm going to change it to plus 3 instead. Especially if you use it with a black box, then you're just basically unkillable. The Beggar's Bazooka is the final weapon we will be talking about for Soldier. I'm not doing the classic because it's a reskin, and if I missed anything else, serve me. The Beggar's Bazooka is okay. The only thing I'd remove is no ammo from dispensers. Going out with a bang. I know. We're finally done with Soldier, and on to what used to be my most played class, Pyro. Pyro is my second favorite class in Team Fortress 2, evidently by my blade time, but I don't think he needs too many buffs or nerfs. Of course, there are some things that can be changed, like the gas battle, thermal thruster, and a couple of his melee weapons, but most notably, nothing really needs to be changed about him. He's a solid character, he's good, and I think he's pretty balanced. I'm writing the script before I'm totally done with all my ideas, so I may come back and make new weapons for the classes, but I do have an idea for Pyro, so we're going to start out with the Power Jack. I believe the Power Jack is simultaneously the best and worst melee weapon Pyro has. Here's my solution. We split it up into two different weapons. One of them being the Pyro Jack, because that's what I thought the Power Jack used to be, and the other being called the Scorching Slammer. I personally really love the name. Alliteration is fun. The Scorching Slammer is an axe with a design like the Winger, being blue with electric bolts going down its head. The stats would be plus 15% faster move speed and 20% damage vulnerability, both while active effects, making this weapon very useful for moving around, kind of like how the Power Jack was, but better than the Power Jack because constant damage vulnerability is a bitch. The Power Jack can keep its health on kill, but in result loses 15% movement speed, because if you look at the Power Jack, it looks really heavy, because it's a giant fucking hammer. I don't know if I want to make it while equipped or while active, but let me know in the comments and I'll pick whichever gets the most results. The Sharpened Volcano Fragment is one of the coolest looking melee weapons in the game, if not the coolest. Sucks that it's fucking terrible though. This weapon is completely useless on Pyro. If it was on literally any other class, it would be pretty good. But because it's Pyro, there's literally no reason to use it. So here's what I think it should do. I think it should be like a throwable, to where you alt fire and you throw a giant magma blast, kind of like the Flying Guillotine. And it'll still apply burn, but because you could do it from really far away, it's much better. But the cost of a minus 30% damage penalty on the magma. It'll still do stock Fire Axe damage, because stock Fire Axe is garbage. Also, I'll get into the magma more later, but there are going to be some more changes, and I'll go more into depth on what it actually does when I get to the Dragon's Breath. The Hot Hand is also pretty bad, like most melee weapons, but I'm just going to change it to be literally the disciplinary action for Pyro, because it's just a much better weapon. The Back Scratcher is okay. I mean, it does what it's supposed to do. Here's the thing, though. I think the Back Scratcher should apply bleed. We're going to remove the plus 15% health from packs and just keep the apply bleed for 6 seconds. I think that's fair enough change. I don't see why a rake would give you extra health. It'll make this weapon more useful because Pyro can already apply fire and you can stack fire and bleed. If you can't, then you can't now because it's stupid that you aren't able to do that. This makes the weapon much more viable, but still not very good. This video is actually mainly to make weapons make more sense than to actually balance them. Don't worry, I am actually balancing them, we just haven't got to Sniper yet. For now, these classes are just making more sense because they're fine. Also, I'm doing this in a weird order because I'm doing it in the order of Wheezy TF2's MVM tier list. So if you go watch his videos, it's going to be in the exact same order. I do this entirely because I'm lazy, and that's the way I obtain the photos. Pyro Shark is a subclass that basically only works on 2 Fort and like 2 other maps. Realistically, this is fine. I mean, Pyro Shark doesn't really need to be a thing. It's kind of hard to do that considering most TF2 maps don't have a lot of water on them. The Neon Annihilator, though, which is Pyro Shark's main weapon, is actually pretty good considering it's a Pyro melee. I don't want to change anything about it. Editor, me here. The script was written before the gas passer counted as a wet substance for the crits. Yeah, that's how long I've been working on this. Please help me. The Man Melter is one of those weird sci-fi weapons that is kind of garbage. All I'm going to do is change the firing speed to minus 25% instead of minus 50, and then the weapon will be kind of not pointless. Home Wrecker is another one of Pyro's melees that does damage to zappers, just like the Neon Annihilator. While this is a good thing, I think we should change something about it. We should remove minus 25% damage versus players, and add 15% damage hammer alone. But mini crit when it would crit. Also decrease the firing speed by 10%. Seems fair. The next Pyro weapon we have is called the Axe Extinguisher. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the killing blows and burning players, granting a speed boost, and instead put applying bleed for 5 seconds, because this is the weapon with a bunch of thorns all around it, so why wouldn't it apply bleed? I promise this video isn't going to turn to let's apply bleed to every fucking weapon, but it just happens that these two were right next to each other, and I was already planning on giving this one bleed. Next is the Scorch Shot, arguably one of the most overpowered weapons of the game. Now, I understand this, but it really shouldn't be the case. So what we're going to do, instead of it exploding like a stickier pill, we're going to make it basically put fire on the ground. That if you step on, lights you on fire, and decrease the damage penalty to only minus 25%. I don't really get this weapon, so I'm probably nerfing this completely the wrong way, just being stupid. But this is what I think, so whatever. I'm very aware that there's a lot of things in this video that are really good nerfs and good balances, and some that are probably complete shit. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm willing to give it a try, because contrary to popular belief, people with little experience of things can be good at it. Of course, that's very rarely the case, but it's possible. Now, the projectile that's going to be throwing is going to be a lot like the magma. I'm not touching the flare gun. Next. I'm also not going to touch the degreaser, but I will talk about the third degree. This weapon is practically the only weapon in the game that's a direct upgrade. So what we're going to do is make it not a direct upgrade. Even though most of Pyro's melees suck balls. What we're going to do is we're going to put a plus 5% damage increase, minus 15% healing for medics, and 10% damage vulnerability. But the damage to everyone attached to the Medi Beam is passive, so it works on your primary and secondary too. Medic is the most important character in the game. You cannot tell me otherwise. If you don't have a medic on your team, you're screwed unless you have like 20 engineers with 15 dispensers all around. But one spy that's slightly good at the game can completely ruin that. The thermal thruster takes a long time for the animation to actually lift you up in the air, so we're going to make it to where that doesn't happen and call it a day. It's going to have a switching speed difference, but the actual animation of you going up is going to be reduced. The detonator is the final flare gun that Pyro owns. Personally, I think you should have a lot more flare guns, but whatever. TF2 isn't getting an update anytime soon, if ever. So, count our blessings, I guess. I'm going to completely remove the damage penalty because all this is just the regular flare gun, but you can manually explode it. I don't really see what's so good about it. I'm just going to remove the damage penalty. I do understand that this could be good, but if you're stupid, 50% damage to self is kind of hard. I don't like the Dragon's Fury. I'm just going to be upfront about it. I don't like it. I like the concept of the weapon, but I just don't like it. So what we're going to do is we're going to change it. Because it's just going to be magma now. Remember the magma from the sharpened volcano fragment? We're going to make it shoot that. It's also going to be like a sticky substance that when it hits the ground, it's going to ignite a certain part of the ground for a couple seconds. But there is going to be a cooldown, so you can't spam it. I haven't thought of exact nerfs and balances because I haven't made the properties of the magma yet. So once I figure that out, I'll probably tweak this a lot. But know that the magma is going to be a lot different than the fireball, because the fireball is more like a gas explosion, but the magma is going to be more like shooting a tennis ball from a tennis ball cannon. Also, it's not going to have any air blast. The back burner is my favorite flamethrower, and the one I use the most because it's good at sneaketh. I'm not going to change it. I feel like the air blast cost is reasonable. I literally never extinguish my teammates because I forget that I can do that, so I'm not going to complain. MVM's most notorious weapon, the Gas Passer. It fucking sucks in casual, though. So what we're going to do is a minus 20% afterburn damage to robots, and plus 20% afterburn damage to players, taking into account MVM and casual/not MVM if you ever play competitive, which there are going to be so many better options to competitive, and I'm not making my server competitive. I think this would help annoying MVM players be less pissy about the Gas Passer, but it also actually being useful in game modes other than MVM, which is helpful when MVM is like 10% of your game. That being said, the next weapon goes hand in hand with this, being the Phlogistinator. Yes, I pronounce it that way, and no, I will not change how I pronounce it. Instead of crits, we're going to do mini crits, and we're going to give it air blast back, making it to where it's plus 200% air blast cost, which is a little bit more than the back burner. We are also going to reduce the oomph meter by 1/4. I don't think the Phlog is necessarily really overpowered, I just think it's kind of broken depending on the people that use it. If you're really bad, you'll get like headshot by a sniper within 2 seconds, but if you're not and you have good positioning, it's a pretty useful weapon. Next is Demoman, my least favorite class in the game, and actually the one with the least playtime. Simply because Demoman exists and I hate him. We'll get into all of that later. I already did a little bit of a rant about Demonite swords and his range and his busted hitboxes, but first, his other weapons. The Pain Train is bad. I don't know all who can equip it, but I'm going to make it a weapon for Demo, Soldier, and Scout. This weapon is a straight downgrade in all modes other than control points, so let's change that. I propose a plus 1% capture rate, plus 1% cart movement speed, and plus 15% movement speed with the intelligence, plus 5 for scout. Also plus 5 HP in any other mode. The sticky jumper is the forgotten little brother of the rocket jumper. Personally, I'm going to make the same changes I did to the rocket jumper. You can carry the intelligence briefcase and the pastime jack, even though I still have no idea what that means. The lock and load is more of an NG counter than really anything else, but honestly, I think it could do with a little bit of buffing. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove that pesky little stat of a decreased blast radius by 25% and buff it by 10%, but reduce this clip size to 2 because there's 2 spots to put the bombs. See, there's 2. The splendid screen is where we start off with Demoman. Personally, I think his shields are fine. I have no complaints about the shields. I'm not going to change any of them. The booties, on the other hand, are going to be substantially nerfed. What we're going to do is we're going to decrease the melee weapon by 25%. That's it. That's all I'm doing. The Scotsman Skull Cutter, other than having a great name, is okay. Like I did with the swords, I'm going to decrease the size to be exactly the same as the Burst Persuader, but remove the 15% slower movement speed and decrease the damage of Demoman's primary by 10%. The Clayton Moore, I hope I said that right, is a big fucking sword. No more! All the swords now have this instead of the large melee range, plus 5% damage, making it to where you have to get closer, but it's more rewarding. The 3-rune blade is a scout reskin of the Boston Basher, so I'm giving it to Demo Knight with the Shahansha stats, because Demo Knight gets the swords, not scout. I'm also going to give it a plus 15% shield recharge rate and time, but minus 10% damage resistance. That's so you can get your health loaded and deal more damage. I'm also going to change it from plus 25, minus 25 to plus 30%, minus 20%. The Quickie Bomb Launcher is quite an odd entry because it fires sticky bombs faster, but honestly, I'm really not going to change this. It's fine, just different. So, if you like the playstyle more, cool. Whatever. The loose cannon is arguably one of the best looking weapons in the entire game, simply because it is literally a cannon on somebody's arm. Demoman took a cannon from an old style cannon, he put it on a stick, and he fires it. The Iron Bomber is the grenade launcher I see used the most out of all of them, and it makes sense. It's definitely a good weapon, arguably better than stock, so let's fix that. I'm going to nerf this weapon into the ground. It's going to have 1 barrel in the clip. It's only going to be able to fire once every second, and it's going to apply bleed to the target. That's all I'm doing. In all seriousness, though, what I am going to do is I'm going to give it a minus 20% explosion radius and minus 5% firing speed. The Scottish resistance is really good. Like, really good. So what we're going to do is minus 25% damage penalty, because this weapon is kind of overpowered. The one bad stat is 0.8 seconds slower bomb time. Okay, I don't see that as a huge downside. There's already one that delays the bomb time intentionally. I could be wrong, but even if it is a pretty big downside, the Scottish Resistance is still one of the best weapons in the game, so therefore I would still put a damage penalty on it, to some extent between 5 and 25%, and a 1 second instead of 0.8. The Ullapool Caber is every drunken Scottishman's dream. A bomb in their hand that you whack at people. Now, the real problem with this weapon isn't anything about it that it says on the stats. It's the fact that it doesn't recharge, and it's very hard to get that first hit explosive back after you've used it. So, all I'm going to do is make it recharge over time and count as a charge meter. Now, what I mean by a charge meter is whenever a sword or primary or whatever would say reduces the blank for charge meter for the shield, it would also count for the caber. Demoman was quite quick because realistically he's 2 different classes, Demoman and Demo Knight. Demo Knight got nerfed into the ground because I don't like him. I nerfed him because Demoman's really annoying. Now, before you go on and say, oh, you nerfed him into the ground because you had a skill issue. Yeah, I did. That's exactly what I did. Yes. Thanks for noticing. I'm not going to be a baby and try to say how OP Demo Knight is. He may have some broken hitboxes, but yeah, it's really just me having a skill issue. It's my video. I get to be petty. Fuck you. Anyway, with that out of the way, it's time to move on to the class I'm the most excited for. The Hoovy. Weapons Guy was the first TF2 character to get his own short film, the rest following short after, rather than Pyro, which got his 3 years later for some reason. Heavy is arguably the mascot of the game, being the biggest character on the box, and the one with the most collaborations, including Sonic All-Star Racing Transformed and Poker Night at the Inventory. He has 300 health, but at the cost of being very slow because he's Queso with Russian. One of the changes I'm going to be doing to Heavy is one that Heavy players have been asking for, which is separating the sandwich and shotgun slots so that it can have 4 slots. This doesn't particularly change much, but sure. First weapon we're going to start off with is one that I thought was a cosmetic, but apparently it isn't. The Holiday Punch. Pretty sure this is a joke weapon, but the only thing I'm going to do is add laughing back to MVM and call it a day. Next is the Family Business, the first shotgun in the line of many that the Heavy uses. This weapon is kind of boring. It doesn't really have a specific gimmick or really feels like it fits the class at all. It's kind of just, let's take some stats and put them together to make a shotgun. And screw it, we'll give it to Heavy, because why not? New weapon time, the Soviet Shooter. It's going to have Soviet paint, and I'm going to give it a creative stat by putting it in the minigun section. This weapon will look essentially like a big shotgun that is styled kind of like a minigun to make Fat Scout be more of an actual subclass rather than just a meme. He'll be able to have this and a new secondary shotgun that I'll make in a minute to where a Fat Scout will be very useful. Its stats are going to be that it fires 2 times the amount of bullets of a regular shotgun, but it has a slower holstering time and slower reload rate. If you get a kill with it, Heavy's movement speed temporarily increases by 10% for 2 seconds. The secondary shotgun that will also go with this will be called the Enforcer. Now, I know Spy already has a weapon called the Enforcer, but we'll change that one's name to the Silencer because it fits Spy better. What the Enforcer will do is essentially, if your speed is increased by any amount, it'll do mini crit damage to opponents. But if you don't have a speed boost, its damage penalty is 10%. Also, it would mini crit when it would normally crit. This weapon is not exclusive to Heavy, but I don't think anybody would use it without Heavy. We'd also give him a sandwich, but instead of a sandwich, it's a protein bar, increasing his damage by 10% and increasing his movement speed by 10%. I'm thinking of adding a health nerf to one of these weapons, but I don't know which one would be. Let me know in the comments. Back to regular Heavy weapons, we have the Natasha, which absolutely sucks to play against and absolutely sucks to use. Applying slow to a target is terrible. I've gone over this multiple times. So what we're going to do is instead of applying slow to a target, you apply speed to yourself. Now, I know this idea has already been used by Grouch and is pretty simple, but it's a good idea. I'm basically just going to take whatever he did and say I'm going to do it because it's a good idea and because slow is so fucking annoying. The Thomas Love is about accuracy. It's about being accurate with your shots. So let's capitalize on that. If you get a headshot, plus 5% damage for 1 second. I'm also going to reduce the spin-up time by 5%, so it's only a plus 15% faster spin-up time. Also, minus 5% damage. The Warrior Spirit. I'm going to change it to where it's a 30 health on kill instead of 50, and a 10% damage vulnerability on wear instead of 30. Also apply bleed for 10 seconds. I'm only going to speed up the Delocus bar recharge rate by 1 second, and it stacks with Overheal. The Eviction Notice. I'm going to remove the maximum health restraint while this item is active, and instead make it to where when you put them on, you take 20 damage. On hit, apply bleed for 10 seconds, and only a 10% faster movement speed. Fists Steel are good, but they've been nerfed into the ground. Minus 40% damage from all sources while active will fix this issue, along with removing the stat of plus 100 damage from melee sources. But you can't be Ubered while this weapon is active, and minus 50% maximum overheal. Killing Gloves of Boxing and the Sandwich are fine, I'm not going to change them. The second banana should heal 150 instead of 200, so that it's not just the sandwich, but like better. The Buffalo Steak Sandwich I am going to change though. Instead of attacks, mini critting, we're going to make them regular crit. We'll see if that's broken. In case you didn't know, the Hulong Heater is pointless. It's completely useless and nobody uses it. So let's change that. Let's change that drastically. Let's make this weapon broken. Well, what we're going to do is remove the consumes an additional 4 ammo when sped up, and instead every ammo is 2, if that makes any sense. Basically, whenever you shoot a bullet, it takes 2 ammo, but when the bullets hit an opponent, they apply burn, and the 25% damage versus burning players is going to do mini crit damage to non-burning players. Also, minus 15% damage. It makes this weapon far more useful, and essentially being a ranged pyro, which is really good, because Afterburn is great. It's not gonna like immediately kill your opponents because they could very easily get to health pack or medic. Also, that like flame around Heavy that literally is pointless, yeah, no, that's gone. There's literally no need for that. The gloves of running urgently are pretty good, but maximum health being drained while the item is active is pretty bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to have it apply marked for death while active. The brass beast is the heavy minigun I use the most. And it's probably my favorite weapon in the game. But the movement speed is so unbelievably crippling. When I wrote this script, I basically only used brass beast when I played heavy, and I was like, okay, this movement speed is pretty bad. Let me switch to the stock. Holy crap, you move so much faster with stock. The movement speed is so crippling. With that being said, instead of minus 60% movement speed, we're gonna bump it down to 45, because oh boy is it slow. So instead of a minus 60% movement speed, we're gonna bump it down to 30, because oh boy is it slow. Now that heavy is done, we can move on to the most interesting character on this, the engineer. He is funny. The engineer, presumably from Texas, ranges with a lot of southern-style weapons, and he makes sentries, dispensers, and teleporters, being one of the most important characters of the game, along with medic. If you don't have an engineer, chances are you're not going to have victory. It is of the utmost importance that you use him correctly, or you will suck massive balls, more than P. Diddy did to little children. The panic attack is a shotgun I honestly expected to get to way earlier, but I didn't. We're going to remove this fact that successful shots become less accurate. If you successfully kill someone, you get a plus 5% movement speed increase for 1 second. The Eureka effect is one of the best registers in the game, making it to where you can teleport to either your base or your exit teleporter. You don't really need an entrance, but your team will hate you if you don't have an entrance, so you should probably make an entrance. Make an entrance. Make an entrance. Make an entrance. I'm gonna make it to where you can have 3 teleporters. An entrance, exit, and spawn room one. This would only ever be really useful if you have 2 or more injuries, so your team can retreat and get supplies easier. The Thompson 6000 is the worst weapon in the entire game, hands down. It's supposed to be more of a support-based weapon, getting rid of cloak and uber charge rate, but it barely does this. So what I'm going to do is add an alt fire that functions like the other laser-based weapons, to where if it hits somebody, it does more damage and removes any sort of charge meter or uber or cloak or anything like that to make it more of a support weapon, but give it minus 25% damage. The Frontier Justice. I absolutely adore the Frontier Justice, but I'm going to remove when your sentry is destroyed and give it a minus 20% movement speed. So you automatically get a crit when your sentry gets a kill, but you can't just run after people critting them. Alright, now, you see, the Southern Hospitality is a wrench for engineer that applies bleed, but literally doesn't do anything else. It gets rid of critical hits, and it's plus 20% fire damage vulnerability on wearer, which doesn't really do much because you don't really ever come across a Pyro as your engineer, because your sentry murders them. And if you don't have a sentry near you, you're either playing battle engineer, or you're stupid, or you're rebuilding it, I guess. So how about we give it a plus 10 damage increase, plus 5% build speed increase, and plus 10 damage vulnerability to all damage due to fire damage. It's maybe underpowered, and if it is, then we'll change it to 15% fire damage, but for now, this seems fair. We're going to remove the ability to short circuit spam on the cart. Short circuit no longer gets any ammo on the cart, but it only costs 60 metal instead of 65. The Widowmaker is really good. I think it's a pretty OP weapon. Let's move it down a notch. Per shot, it takes 35 ammo. Also, the 10% increased hit to your sentry's target is stupid. I'm adding 5% damage and minus 10% ammo on hit. Next is the Rescue Ranger. It's a good weapon. I see many people using it. Also, what the fuck does 4-to-1 health to metal ratio when repairing buildings mean? Like, can somebody explain that? I'm probably gonna change it more once I know what that actually fucking means. If it means what I think it does, then when you're repairing your sentry, your metal is worth more? I don't know. I don't fucking know. The Wrangler is broken. So very broken. Hard nerf time. The shield only prevents 20% of damage and repairs, but the sentry is not disabled after it's wrangled. Mainly because there's been too many fucking times where I fat finger onto the Wrangler and my sentry is disabled for 3 seconds, and then the Pyro says hi and murders me and my entire family and makes me want to die. The Jag is good. No change. That was an anticlimactic end to NG. But next we have the Medic. Now, boy, do I have some ideas for this German doctor. The Solemn Vow used to be a direct upgrade, then people complained and Valve changed it, which is fair. I'm going to replace the slower firing speed with plus 5% damage vulnerability while active. I mean, what else do you want me to do? It's the Solemn Vow. Nobody uses it anyway. The Amputator is a big fucking saw, so we're going to add plus 15% damage boost, but minus 10% healing from all sources, meaning when you go to get a health pack or a medic, he heals you 10% less, not the other way around. The Blitzauger is fine, but I think it should be minus 1 HP instead of 2. The Overdose is the most popular syringe gun among medics, and for good reason. It increases your movement speed by how much Uber charge you have. I'm going to change the damage penalty from minus 15% to 25%, but remove the speed cap. I want medics faster than Scout. If this is too broken, I'll change it. I have a feeling it is. So after I most likely change it, I'll put a more reasonable cap and turn the damage penalty from minus 20 to 25%. Oh boy! Vaccinator time! Here's the deal. There are like 4,000 different things I could do with this, but I'm going to settle with plus 30% Uber charge rate, and you can only have 2 Uber charges rather than 4, but it's a 15% damage resistance instead. The quick fix is changing the heal rate from plus 40 to plus 30. I don't know if this weapon needs nerfing. I don't actually have any mediguns, but stop. The Crusader's Crossbow is the most used medic primary, mainly because all the other ones are pretty shit. This one's actually good though, but only slightly. The only thing I'm giving the Crusader's Crossbow is a plus 10% reload time. The Uber Saw is broken, not because of the stats, but because of the concerningly high random crit chance. So here's what I propose. No random crits, but it has a random number between 10 to 15% lower firing speed. That, or I could just make it mini crit when it would normally crit. The Crit's Krieg is the medigun with no Uber. So I'm buffing it! Plus 30% Uber charge rate, and plus 10% heal rate. The players healed by this weapon can't random crit. I think this would help with keeping the team alive while Ubering, and not just for a pub push. I may have overdone it a bit, but we'll see. So far, Medic's been pretty boring, but here's where that changes. Have you ever wanted a walking dispenser? No? Well, too bad, because now with the Agistator, you can! This is what I meant at the beginning of the video when I said Sniper can't get ammo from Medic. Here are its stats. While the Medibeam is attached, give 3 ammo a second. Also gives Medic a 10% movement speed buff at the cost of minus 50% heal speed and a minus 10% damage resistance for Medic. Let's dive into this. 3 ammo a second is barely anything for Heavy, especially with the Hulong heater. That's the point. It encourages the Medic to heal other classes, but not Pyro because fuck you. It still helps, don't get me wrong, but it's not optimal. It also reduces the likelihood of you losing the Medic because you have to go get ammo and the Medic wasn't paying attention. I'm very well aware I'm walking on a tightrope with this one. I've got to make the usable and able to rival the stock, but not so good that it causes the Medic to break the game and eventually become pointless. Who needs a dispenser and sentry if Medic can just Uber a Heavy with infinite ammo? Okay, now it's time for the class we've all been waiting for. Drumroll, please. That's right, it's Sniper! This is going to be a very interesting class. I'll save the most interesting 2 for last. I have a lot to talk about with Sniper. So, let's get started. The Troubleman Shiv is top tier ass. It is the worst sniper weapon. Instead, we're going to give it a minus 50% damage penalty, but 10 seconds to bleed instead of 6. I really don't know what to do with this weapon. The Classic is universally known as the worst sniper rifle, simply because it gets rid of the entire point of the class, clicking on enemy gamers' heads. So, it can headshot now, but minus 30% damage period instead of 10% from body shots. It does fire Machina tracer bullets, though. This is because I want it to be a skill-based weapon, like the entirety of Sniper should be. He should be a skill-based class. You'll see this a lot with Sniper and everything else in this video. The Shahancha is an interesting idea, but executed terribly, especially on Sniper. This weapon would do much better on a class like Demo Knight, so that's why I put its stats on Demo Knight. So what we're going to do is we're going to give this one a flat plus 50% damage, but minus 5% damage while out, and minus 10% movement speed while out. Sniper moves too fast, and slowing him down makes it much easier to target and tell him his free trial of life has ended. By the way, side note here, whatever I show on the screen, because if you haven't noticed by now, which you're either blind or you have your iPad off because you're YouTube Premium, but whenever I show a picture of the weapon and its changes, the picture overrides whatever I'm saying. So make sure you read what's on there, because I might change it last second and just be too fucking lazy to change my audio, because, man, this video is taking way too long already. The Darwin's Danger Shield is pointless. Good snipers don't encounter pyros, or if they do, they're using the Girardi. So we're going to change it to where it lets the rifle random crit, plus 10% melee damage, and a plus 10% melee damage resistance from behind, but minus 10% rifle accuracy, and plus 5% charge meter time. That's a lot of stats, so let's talk about them. I want Sniper's melee to be a valid option, not just for when you run out of ammo. I also want Sniper to be great at long range, not God, and good at close range. Because why pull out your melee when you could just quick scope 150 someone? This change makes it more reasonable to use the melee. Speaking of melee, I'm increasing the length of all of Sniper's melees to be the longest, other than Pyro, Scout, Soldier, and Demoman, because I want to. The Sydney Sleeper is okay. It mini crits on headshots, but you can cover your enemies in piss. This weapon is a good idea, but applied differently than expected. So here's the new weapon stats. On scoped hit, apply Girardi for 1 to 6 seconds based on charge meter. On unscoped shot, apply Girardi for half a second. Scoped headshots reduce the remaining cooldown of Girardi by 1 second. Minus 25% charge rate, mini crits when you would normally crit. The entire point of Sniper is headshots, so essentially removing that is bad. Also for achievement purposes. So I just made it mini crit when it would normally crit, and made the charge rate slower so there's a bigger incentive to get up close to enemies and play offensively. The Razorback is the anti-spy weapon, but it's kind of pointless in some scenarios, and completely broken in others. I think the maximum over here should be changed to where you can't get the Razorback refilled unless you die. This is a hard nerf though. So once the Razorback is broken, you get plus 10% health from medics and health packs, but minus 15% ammo from ammo boxes. This again would encourage more aggressive sniper playstyle. The Cleaner's Carbine is the only SMG other than stock, and I don't see it getting used much. Probably because the Girardi is so much better. I'm going to make it crit whenever it would mini crit, give plus 10% accuracy, but give it a minus 25% clip. Also, if it doesn't already, doing damage with any weapon adds to the meter, because why would you use the Cleaner Carbine when the Girardi plus Bushwhacker does the exact same thing, better and faster? It's a no-brainer. I'll get to the Girardi later. I want this weapon to be valid in most situations. This definitely needs some heavy playtesting, but I think the Girardi would still be preferred, unless you're using the Sydney Sleeper, in which case you can apply Piss and then crit them, which is pretty good. The Machina is the rifle I always use because I'm bad. It's the perfect bad gamer camp weapon, but it's still not very good. Cannot fire unless zoomed is absolutely horrendous, especially with the current sniper. So it's just going to do plus 15% damage while scoped and penetrate players while scoped. That should make it even better for camping, but you may have noticed it doesn't fix the main problem. Cannot fire unless zoomed. That's the point. Sniper's melee and secondaries are much better now, so it's not that much of a drawback anymore. But I can see how this might be underpowered, so it'll do 32 damage when fired while not zoomed, play a shock animation that stuns Sniper for half a second, and disable the charge while zoomed in feature for 2 seconds, making it really a last resort move if your enemy is low health. The point is to use melees and secondaries like Girardi instead of the Machina when enemies are close range. Speaking of Girardi, it's like the Gas Passer or one of Soldier's banners, but faster. So here's what I'm thinking. We increase the charge rate by 2 seconds, and it can't be refilled by ammo packs, because what the fuck is Sniper doing? Putting, like, ammo in his cock, making him piss again? Like, what the hell? Fun fact! Did you know that piss is actually highly flammable? So then why does it put out teammates? Let's turn that on its head. It increases afterburn by 6 seconds, but once Girardi runs out, the afterburn doesn't mini crit. These changes should be a nerf in theory, but I can see how I just buffed the Girardi. Hopefully not, though. The Bizarre Bargain is the only weapon in the game that ignores its downside after a few kills. So let's make it a weapon for the really god players who want a bigger challenge. An entire rework, if you will. Its new stats are minus 10% accuracy, minus 25% base charge speed, plus 15% damage. Each scoped kill increases the weapon's charge rate by 15% up to 200%. But if you miss a shot or die, the charge increase resets. Now, this weapon takes a lot more skill, but a little bit of luck to keep up the streak and get the speed increased. This should make the Bizarre Bargain not be the de facto rifle anymore. The Coasty Camper is fine, but I'm putting a minus 5% movement speed nerf on it. The Bushwhacker is the melee weapon that's used with Girardi. If it doesn't already, then the 20% damage vulnerability is only when the weapon is active. The Hitman's Heatmaker. Remember those nerfs for the sniper class I had said at the beginning about all rifles firing Machina bullets? This one isn't. It's going to fire classic-based tracers. I don't want to completely get rid of tracers, but this one shouldn't be as affected, considering it has a silencer on it. Also, in focus, you can reload while scoped, if you can already. I saved the best for last. The Huntsman, also known as the Luxman, for good reason. I'm going to increase the charge rate and fix the broken hitbox reg in TF2. I don't think I can actually do this on my server, so for now, mini crits I'm going to normally crit, including headshots. If you don't know what's wrong with the Huntsman, I suggest watching A Man's Guide to the Huntsman by Soundsmith, because I really don't have the time or effort to go into depth here. That was Sniper, arguably the class that needed this the most. But there is one more class, a current main actually, the Frenchman with a knife and a gun, the Spy. Is an interesting class. To some people, he's insanely OP, mainly sniper and heavy mains. But to others, he's weak AF, mainly Pyro, formerly me, and Demoman mains. Personally, as a spy main, I think he can be good with the right setup and absolute dog shit in the wrong setup. The knife I use most of the time is the yaaay, and I'm not changing it. The Ambassador, on the other hand, I definitely will change. This weapon used to be every spy main's dream, but now it's pointless. I'm removing the damage penalty and replacing it with a minus 10% accuracy. This makes it harder to hit a headshot, but is still okay without. This should work as intended, but it might need some additional tweaks. The Enforcer, now called the Silencer, is the meme weapon of TF2, and not just because Grouch. I love you, man, but I am never letting that go. Plus 20% damage penalty while disguised, and attacks pierce damage resistance, but 20% slower firing speed and no random crits. You only get one shot with plus 20% damage per encounter, unless you're disguising mid-encounter, which you're probably going to die before then, which is only about 11 more damage. So here's what I'm going to do. Its stats are now going to be, Spy can attack while disguised, and after he attacks, immediately put that disguise back on. Minus 10% damage for all weapons, plus 10% faster disguise rate, mini crits when it would normally crit, and plus 10% damage penalty while equipped. No disguise mode. This should make it easier to delete NGs without the yaaay. It also makes it easier to fool people, amongst other things. This is going to be an interesting weapon to see used. By the way, when I say you can attack while disguised, I mean with the gun, not the knife. Or the sapper. Because that would be fucking stupid. The Latrange is one of two well-balanced top spy guns. I'm reducing the cloak on hit by 5%, but increase the damage by 5%, so the gun can still deal some damage. Okay, it's time to go into the problem weapons of Spy. We're starting off with the kunai. It's broken, so let's fix it. On backstab, steal half health from enemy. Minus 20 max health, deals 5 damage on miss. This makes it a lot harder to combine with a Dead Ringer to be a bitch. And you're also more likely to accidentally activate the Dead Ringer with the 5 HP miss penalty. Hopefully this works as intended. Speaking of the Dead Ringer, let's fuck it upside the head. Cloak type, Fiend Death. Leave a fake corpse on taking damage and prevent it all. Temporarily gain invisibility, 150% speed, and the ability to see all enemy players in a 5-foot radius, even through walls. Also, minus 10 health from the wearer. Hope this isn't too underpowered, but I can see how glorified wall hacks could be broken. We'll see. Time for the diamond bag. Personally, I don't see how it's OP, but I've never encountered it, so its new stats are as follows. Gives 1 guaranteed mini crit for each building destroyed with your zapper or backstab kill. Mini crits whenever it would crit. No random crits. Minus 20% damage. If you miss, clear all crits. If you die, clear all crits. I'm treating this like I did with the Bizarre Bargain, a skill-based weapon. If you're good, it's barely a change. If you're bad, it's essentially a direct downgrade. I like the idea of getting crits for doing what you're supposed to. That is how game design works.
Okay, so originally I had a change for the big earner, and it was going to be this next weapon, but I realized I was being stupid and that the big earner still had a use, so I just made a completely separate weapon for this next one. I call it the Shaded Shredder.
So now, its stats are as follows. Oh boy. Plus 60% cloak on kill, plus 100% cloak on backstab. Can attack while cloaked, minus 120 max health. Maximum health cannot be reduced by anything but this weapon. No disguising, no receiving damage penalties. Well, this is probably the most outrageous change I've made yet, for obvious reasons. This could be really OP, which is why I nerfed the health specifically. If you couldn't tell, it's really meant to be used with a cloak and dagger. I always thought Spy should be able to attack while cloaked, and when I first started playing, I thought he could, but now I know for balance reasons he can't. This probably is going to work, because if you backstab someone in one spot, and you're still there, they're gonna come back and accidentally hit you with like a scatter gun or something, you're gonna immediately die, because you only have 5 HP. Hopefully this works. This is gonna be the stupidest change in the video, though. The final spy weapon for this video is an original I saw on Reddit, the Interrogator's Disappointment. The OG stats for the weapon are as follows. Hits always count as backstabs. On melee or secondary miss, kill yourself. Cloaking is 20% slower. In quotes, leaving your cyanide pill in the base is no longer an excuse. I'm going to remove the secondary miss penalty and put this kitchen knife model from the scout weapon also found on Reddit instead. Let's hope all this works as intended. As I said at the beginning, I have no way of testing this at the moment. I have no idea how to make a server or even how to change weapon stats if I could. I also said at the beginning that if this video does well, and I probably will do it anyway, I will make a server. I also want to see more professional TF-tubers' reactions to this, like Great Blue and Co. did to Grouch's video, just hopefully with better reception. This video took me forever to make. I normally don't ask this, but if you enjoyed it, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. It really helps me a lot. When I do hopefully make the server, I'll take what the comments think into account. I'm not perfect in either of these changes. Hopefully I've entertained some people with my batshit insane ideas. If you couldn't tell, this is the first video I've ever really professionally edited. First video I've scripted and released. It's a big step up for me in my content, and this is actually my second time recording this, because originally I had recorded the entire script, literally the whole thing. I had started editing it, I'd gotten halfway through, just cutting out all the stutters, because I'm not a perfect talker, I actually have a speech impediment, and doing all that, and then I lost the fucking file for this one, and the Sonic Zone ranking script, which will be next, by the way, and I had just lost motivation for a long time. It's been a few months since I've actually worked on this. This specific recording is being done the 2nd of February of 2025. Don't know how long it's going to take for me to get this out. Probably another month or two. But thank you guys for being so patient. And sorry I've been drowning most of my stuff out with music. I made it a personal goal to not upload anything, at least to the main channel, until I'm done with this video. Yeah. Before I go, all the music used in this video will be in the description in a playlist. I have this playlist of all the songs I've ever used in a video, that for like background music. So, yeah, there's that. This is a recording on a different day. It is currently 1:53 in the morning. I have been editing this since I got home from school at 3:45. And it's finally done. I have to put one little thing in the beginning, and then I'm done. Okay. Thank you to Mr. Saxon for the footage for Medic, Engineer, Sniper, and Spy, because I wanted to get this done today, and I didn't have enough time to record footage, and I couldn't find my Sniper footage, even though I eventually did. Man, this is taking a lot out of me. It'll probably be a while until I upload something else of this quality, but I really appreciate it. Well, thank you everybody so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye!